So guys, we're just sitting down with Derek at the Bible Society here. We're just going to have a little chat about the publishing side of what the Bible Society do, and perhaps something about the translations and what might be coming up on the horizon. Derek, thanks for spending a few minutes of your day. I do appreciate that.
Pleasure.
Tell us a little bit about the publishing aspect of the Bible Society. We perhaps know you, the Bible Society, for publishing the Good News Bible. Tell us a little bit about that translation and the history of your relationship with it.
Yeah, it goes back quite a long way. In fact, I remember on summer camp back in probably 1976 or 7, something like that, getting a Good News Gospel.
Right.
At that time, it was known as Good News for Modern Man.
Ah, yes, I do remember that.
Yeah,
yes.
with all the Annie Valiton illustrations inside and that kind of thing. So, and at that time, it was published, I think, in partnership with HarperCollins.
Right.
And so these days it's published by us exclusively in the UK. And we've been developing it over time and looking to really make the most of what is a really good translation. It's been compared to others. We've compared it to others and said, does it need revising? And actually doesn't seem to need revising. We did some changes to it a few years ago to incorporate language that was more consistent, but on the whole it's been unchanged for quite a long time in terms of its language.
Yes, because that is something that we see nowadays with, I think the New American Standard Bible had a translation update in 2020. I know the NIV has, the ESV has had some text edition updates, but yeah, that's really interesting that there hasn't been that many changes to the Good News Bible. So it's easy. Would you say it's true to say that it's an easier to read translation?
I think different publishers put a lot of emphasis on whether translation is easy to read or difficult to read or whatever, and really what we look at is this the right level of translation for this audience?
Yes.
And increasingly these days, the market is divided into people who like different kinds of translations, and some will think about where a particular translation is on the translation spectrum of dynamic versus formal equivalence and that kind of thing.
Right, yes.
But this is it's not simplistic, but it is straightforward to understand. You don't have kind of traditional church language in it. So very good for people who haven't been brought up with that church language.
Yeah.
So it's used a lot by youth and young people and adults, of course, who prefer something that doesn't have difficult language in it.
Yeah. So it's certainly a translation which would be good for mission outreach, evangelical.
Absolutely.
When you're dealing with people who are not from several generations of Christians, sort of thing. Yeah.
And we've done specific editions, both in terms of Gospels, New Testaments, Bibles, for that very purpose.
Yes.
Because most people, as you say, if you go and meet them on the street, try and share with them a whole range of translations, they'll be lost.
Yeah.
And that's a particular challenge, really. And even with the Good News, the layout of a lot of editions can be a put-off to people. So, you know, we have some editions, therefore, that have an even simpler layout.
Yes, one of the things I know that the Bible Society produces, Derek, is the editions that are aimed at those with dyslexia. Tell us a little bit about those editions, because they're really interesting.
Yeah, we really felt that there were certain groups of people who we might think of as marginalised, who deserve to have access to the Scripture. Absolutely. And so we spent about a year researching it and then working to some of the standards of the British Dyslexia Society.
Right.
And coming up with a layout, a single column layout on cream-coloured paper, very thick paper.
Yes. Because it has to be quite opaque, doesn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. I want to see as little as possible through the sheet of paper. And, you know, the interline spacing, the inter-character spacing, all these things are taken into account. And so it took quite a long time to design that. Now, like most good typography, when you look at it, you might not notice that straight away.
No.
Normally, you'll notice bad typography that's difficult to read, but this is easy to read. And next year we will have published the whole of the Bible in that dyslexia-friendly format.
Yes.
Not as one volume, because that would be massive.
Yes, these are pretty thick volumes because of the thickness of the paper,
Yeah.
the word count, and spacing and things like that.
That's
yeah.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So and some of the testimonies we had back were fantastic.
Yeah. The feedback's
Just
been
so
good.
moving.
Yeah.
Like one church minister who said all the way through theological college he could barely read the Bible,
Right.
and now he could read it for himself easily, and that is just fantastic.
That's really good.
Because at the end of the day, we want people to be able to read and engage with their Bible.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's and when you have that sort of condition, the Bible must be one of the worst books to try and read in its current, in its usual traditional format, because it's just words everywhere, isn't it?
Yeah.
Small print, thin paper. It must be a nightmare.
Very, very much so. And so some of those principles we've carried over into other Bibles. That is, how can we break up the text a bit more?
Yeah.
How can we introduce, in some cases, colour
Yes.
to help people? So it's important that we think about just how do people read and what do they find easy to read.
Yeah.
Now, at the end of the day, there's a lot of words in the Bible.
Oh yeah,
and
you
there's
can't
no
get around
getting
that.
away from that.
Yeah.
Except that breaking it up, like with the dyslexia editions, into individual books or groups of books, that's one way of dealing with the sheer volume of material in the Bible.
Yeah, definitely.
So we put a lot of thought into how can we present Scripture in a way that's appropriate for each individual audience. And on those dyslexia editions, we put on there that this is designed for people with dyslexia.
So the Good News Bible is your primary translation that you publish, but you were telling me earlier, Derek, that that's not the only translation you publish. Is that
That's correct. So we publish about 8 or 9 different translations in English,
right?
plus translations in various other languages, including Welsh. And
Right.
we also stock a lot of languages that people speak in the UK.
Yes.
So up to about 80 different languages, and in some cases in a variety of formats.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, English is certainly not the only language spoken in the UK now, so we have to make sure that there's, again, if you go out onto the street and you're meeting people and giving out New Testaments or Gospels, it would be nice to have different translations in their own language, for sure.
Yeah, and for us as Bible Society, that's really important. And recently, with the war in Ukraine, a lot of people came over here.
Yeah.
We had a Ukrainian lady staying with us for 6 months, and it was great to be able to give her and her daughters, who were living elsewhere, and the grandchildren, copies of the Bible and the New Testament in their own language, but also in a diglot form. So that is where you have, in fact, they spoke, their first language was Russian, so it has Russian and English side by side.
That's excellent. That's fantastic. Yeah. So, which of the other translations do you produce?
So there's English Standard Version. We have a number of editions of that. Contemporary English Version, the Easy English Bible, which is meant for people who are learning English, 1,200 word vocabulary.
Right.
And that's really good for that purpose.
That must be a challenge trying to produce some of those, yeah.
Yeah, so we'll publish the full Bible in that translation next year. We already have some of the Gospels in that translation. But again, we just think it's important that as people learn English, that they're able to get to grip with Scripture as well, and that is part of their learning.
Yeah, that could be a stepping stone to help them to read the Bible.
That's right. On to maybe Good News or something else, as part of that process. So there are a variety of other translations as well. RSV, for example, we publish a lot of RSV, but actually not in the UK, because our principal markets are actually overseas, and RSV is huge, as is Good News, and that's principally for schools overseas in West Africa, East Africa, Asia, etc.
Yeah, we were speaking about the Rainbow Edition with Jack earlier. So, yeah, it certainly seems like that's an area, a really important area as well, because you're dealing with young lives that need the gospel, that need the message of the Bible. So basically, nobody really slips through the cracks, I suppose.
Hopefully not.
You've covered just about every eventuality, which is
Yeah.
really noble ambition.
Yeah, but I think part of this is not just that everybody should have a Bible or have access to a Bible, but it's that they engage with it.
Yes.
So far too often, Bibles can end up on a shelf.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because maybe it's hard to get into, maybe it's hard to understand. And that's what we're trying to deal with, if you like, by making the Bible more interactive. Not just for young people, but for adults as well. And adults appreciate elements of interactivity, if you like. You know, put your thoughts here, think about this, engage with this passage, and then do this or that. So that engagement's really important, and getting people to think about how does that affect the way they live? How does that affect their everyday life?
Yeah.
And what does that mean for them in the long term? So
Absolutely.
it's not just about Bibles need to be available, it's about Bible engagement also.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. It's beyond just ticking the box of, here you are, here's a Bible that's for you. It's actually trying to make sure that it actually gets read and gets engaged with. And as we have mentioned already, the main aim really is so that people have these encounters with God. Jack used the word discover. They're discovering God. They're discovering his message to man. So yeah, that's a really, really important thing. And another part of what you do, Derek, is looking at new things, new additions that the society might be interested in bringing to the market. One of the things that you mentioned earlier was this new translation by Nicholas King. Do you want to mention something about that just briefly?
Yeah, so this is, we believe everybody should be able to have Scripture. And in this case, it's partly for Catholics, but also for people who are happy with having the Apocrypha or the books of the Bible that Catholics would expect to see. And he's an individual, a Catholic priest who has translated the Bible, and but also there's audio with it. So the audio will be available to Catholics, and we hope that that will help draw them into reading the Nicholas King Bible and getting into Scripture. You know, some of my colleagues who are Catholic have had the experience of they have the Bible, but they're not used to reading it so much. And so this is a way into helping them with that.
Fascinating. Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
and we tend to think of perhaps Protestants as being more used to reading the Bible, but increasingly, as the Bible is so much available, actually, on the whole, people are reading it less.
Yes.
And so, again, back to how do we make it not artificially attractive, but how do we help people get into it? You know,
drawing them into it, isn't it?
Yeah.
I suppose, so that more time is spent ultimately reading it,
and more understanding is gained, and more personal experience of it and what God is saying to us through the words of Scripture.
Well, that's it. And a Christian who's not reading the Bible is ultimately not hearing God's voice in their life. So we need to make sure, we need to try and make every effort to see people in the Word. Now, you mentioned that this is quite an interesting edition because it's not translation by committee as such. This is a translation that's by an individual.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, and so we're hoping his tone of voice will come through with this, and also the voice of the characters in the Bible, and that this will be, from that perspective, quite a unique Bible and powerful. So he's a Jesuit priest, and it's to my mind it's a really interesting translation, and it's a really good experience actually to sit down around a table with different translations and read some of the same passages and compare them to how they sound and what do we get from them. and this is one of those that can be very good for that, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it's a very attractive volume. And when's this being published, Derek?
So that's going to be published in the next few months.
Yep.
And very excited about that.
Fantastic. Yeah.
And we have quite an extensive publishing program. Some of it aimed at the UK, some of it aimed at international markets, working through other Bible societies. Excuse me. So we'll often produce Bibles like this, and other Bible societies will take copies as well. And that way we're able to do reasonable print runs, and that helps keep the cost down for both international and domestic here as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
No, fantastic. Yeah, so I mean, you're obviously quite busy with editions like this. There's a broad range of things. Can people check out these on the website?
Yeah,
if we
absolutely.
link to the Bible Society website, they'll be able to see all the sort of things that we're engaged in from a publishing perspective, anyway, as well as the mission type things and the other activities of the society.
Yeah, the things that are available here in the UK from us will be on our shop.
Yeah, brilliant.
The products that are specifically for overseas are not, because actually the Bible Society in the country that it's going to will have it on their shop,
be specific to
available
them,
for their market and their audience.
Fantastic.
And so there are some products some Bibles that are specifically for UK and might not be available overseas, and there are quite a number that are available overseas but not here. Often they're just different editions of the same Bible. So we've got, for instance, on the Good News Bible, there are lots of editions for overseas, lots of editions for the UK, and some of them use the same insides but a different cover.
Yes, we looked at the Youth Bible, how it had completely different covers, because each edition of the Youth Bible for different countries had been sort of made specific to that specific location and had input from the local Bible Society there. So they put their own spin on it as well, which I thought was really interesting. You know, you wouldn't perhaps see that in other publishing companies. So that was really cool.
Yeah, but still along the same principles of what's the audience looking for, but in their context, and what will engage that audience in their context. And so sometimes the format has to change as well.
Yes.
For that very reason. And so our Youth Bible, there's a version of that for the international markets that is smaller in format and presented slightly differently, but the principles of how it's presented are actually all the same.
Yeah.
And that's done exceedingly well overseas as well.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, yeah, I mean, one of the takeaways for me from today about the society is that it's very much a listening society. All of the products that we've mentioned and the Bibles that are produced, the publishing ethos is very much, what does the person who we're trying to reach, what is it they want? What is it they are looking for? How can we make it for them by listening to their voice and getting their input, rather than us guess at it and do our spin on it? It's very much a two-way thing involving the end user, which I think is really interesting.
That's absolutely right, and it goes right the way down to what's in that particular Bible. If there are additional materials in it, what is it that the audience needs? It also applies to the design. What kind of design do they really want, and that will resonate with them, rather than me or someone else deciding, I think they should have this or that.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you very, very much for your time, Derek. I do
Pleasure.
appreciate it. It's been fascinating to get a little insight into the work of the Bible Society from the publishing angle. I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Pleasure, thank you.